Listen carefully, for what I am about to declare is not mere words, not idle encouragement, but a divine message that will shake your heart and awaken the fire within your spirit. From the 18th to the 22nd of December, God is moving in ways that will be unmistakable, undeniable, and transformative. This is a time that He has appointed, 5 days in which heaven itself aligns to bring revelation, breakthrough, and divine intervention into your life. If you think that the ordinary can contain the extraordinary, you are mistaken. For God is about to show you that His power is not limited by circumstance, by fear, or by the impossible situations that have held you captive. The days ahead are not just days. They are a portal, a season in which your destiny will accelerate. And every heartache, every delay, every unanswered prayer will encounter God's unstoppable hand. You must understand something crucial. God is never idle. Even when it seems that life is silent, even when the enemy whispers lies and plants fear, God is orchestrating events, setting in motion movements that the human eye cannot yet perceive. From the 18th to the 22nd, God is releasing divine patterns of blessing that will overwhelm those who have been faithful, who have prayed, who have held on when hope seemed like a distant memory. Do not let doubt enter your heart, for doubt will blind you to the wonders God is about to perform. These 5 days are sacred, charged with heavenly authority, and every moment of them holds potential for miracles, for reconciliation, for restoration, for breakthrough that will echo into the next year. The first thing you must know is that God will bring clarity. Clarity in your mind, in your decisions, in your heart. There are choices you have wrestled with, situations you have been confused about, relationships you have wondered about, and paths you have feared to take. God is going to shine a light on everything that has been shadowed by uncertainty. He will reveal truth where deception has lingered. He will lift the veil that has hidden your destiny, and suddenly what was confusing will become clear. You will see the direction you must take, the steps you must follow, and the voice that has been silent will speak with a clarity that cannot be ignored. Do not underestimate this revelation, for in clarity lies power. When you see the way God is opening, hesitation becomes unnecessary, fear becomes powerless, and your faith will rise with a new intensity. Secondly, God is going to move in the realm of provision. There are areas in your life where you have lacked, where you have prayed for financial increase, for resources, for opportunities that seem beyond reach. Between the 18th and the 22nd, God is releasing divine favor. Doors that were locked will swing open. Opportunities that were hidden will be revealed. What has been impossible in human terms will become inevitable through the hand of God. This is not about luck, not about chance, not about coincidence. It is God's timing, God's promise, God's intervention. And let me tell you, it will come in ways so unmistakable that you cannot deny His presence. Some of you will receive unexpected breakthroughs at work, in business, in studies, or in creative endeavors. Others will experience financial restoration, debt release, or a sudden alignment of circumstances that feels miraculous. The key is to remain expectant, to remain faithful, and to position yourself in alignment with God's will. When you do, the provision that He has prepared for you will not just meet your needs, it will exceed your imagination. Third, God is going to bring reconciliation. There are relationships that have been broken, friendships that have turned cold, families that have been divided, and hearts that have been hardened. God is not just going to intervene in your life. He's going to heal relational wounds. Between the 18th and 22nd, expect peace to be restored, misunderstandings to be cleared, and broken connections to find restoration. But understand this, God will only restore what aligns with His plan for you. He will remove toxicity, He will purge what is harmful, and He will reintroduce only that which nurtures your destiny. You may encounter people who come back into your life unexpectedly, conversations that bring clarity, forgiveness that brings freedom. Guard your heart with wisdom, but open it to God's movement. For in His hands, reconciliation is not just emotional. It is spiritual, it is liberating, and it sets the stage for your next level of victory. Fourth, God is going to release a wave of protection. The enemy has been plotting, forces have been at work to intimidate you, to delay you, to steal your peace, but from the 18th to the 22nd, God is sending a hedge of protection around your life. This protection is invisible, yet impenetrable. It will guard your mind, your body, your spirit, your home, your finances, and your destiny. You will see that the attacks that have plagued you for months, maybe even years, will lose their power. You will feel a supernatural covering, a peace that surpasses understanding, and an awareness of God's presence that cannot be shaken. Walk boldly during this time, knowing that you are shielded, that you are defended, that you are preserved. Fear has no place here, for God's protection is active, it is relentless, and it will. Ensure that you emerge victorious from situations that once seemed insurmountable. Finally, God is going to ignite destiny. These 5 days are not just about temporary blessings, they are about long-term transformation. God is setting into motion sequences that will position you for your future, for the life He has promised you, for the impact He intends you to make. Every decision, every prayer, every moment of faithfulness during this time will be amplified. Doors will open that have been sealed for years. Opportunities will align that have been distant for a lifetime. Your dreams, your purpose, your calling will begin to manifest with a clarity and power that cannot be denied. This is not a time to remain passive. This is a time to move, to act, to pray, to believe, and to align yourself fully with God's instructions. Destiny is not accidental. It is designed, it is planned, and it is unfolding right now. I want you to understand something vital. God's timing is perfect. Even when it seems that life has delayed you, that the world is unfair, that your prayers have gone unheard, this is the moment where the scales tip in your favor. From the 18th to the 22nd, there is a convergence of heaven's power, favor, and wisdom ready to impact your life in ways that will echo far beyond these days. You will look back and recognize this period as a turning point. A moment where God's hand was undeniably active, where your faith was rewarded, and where your destiny began a new chapter of unstoppable momentum. You must prepare. You must position your heart, your mind, and your spirit. Remove doubt, remove fear, remove distraction. These 5 days are sacred, and God's power will only move where there is expectation, faith, and readiness. Speak life over your circumstances. Declare God's promises over your situation. Walk in righteousness, walk in humility, walk in prayer, and God will honor every step. The enemy will attempt to bring confusion, hesitation, and fear, but you are armed with faith, protected by God, and aligned with a destiny that cannot be stolen. Remember this, when God moves, He moves with precision. He does not stumble. He does not delay unnecessarily. He sees the bigger picture that you cannot yet see. He orchestrates events, aligns hearts, and opens doors so that when your breakthrough comes, it is undeniable to you and to all who witness it. These 5 days are a spiritual convergence, a divine window of opportunity that has been prepared for you, not by chance, but by God's infinite wisdom. I urge you to rise above complacency. I urge you to prepare your spirit for what is coming. Prayer is your weapon. Faith is your shield. Obedience is your pathway. God is about to move in ways that will exceed your understanding, exceed your expectations, and exceed every human limitation. From the 18th to the 22nd of December, expect God's clarity, provision, reconciliation, protection, and destiny to manifest in your life in ways so powerful that you cannot contain your joy, your gratitude, or your faith. You may have walked through storms. You may have faced trials that tested your patience. You may have been tempted to give up. But these 5 days are a divine reset. A heavenly recalibration, a season where God demonstrates that His power is greater than every problem, every obstacle, every enemy, and every limitation. Stand firm, speak boldly, act faithfully, and when these days arrive, you will recognize them as a divine appointment, a sacred moment where God's hand is unmistakable, undeniable, and unstoppable. Hear me now, clarity is not just the absence of confusion. It is a spiritual awakening, a divine revelation that awakens the mind and ignites the spirit. From the 18th to the 22nd of December, God will know. Merely whisper answers. He will illuminate your path with a brilliance that blinds the doubts and exposes the lies of the enemy. You will know what decisions to make and what doors to walk through because God Himself will point the way. No longer will you wander in hesitation. No longer will fear paralyze your steps. You will move with the certainty of a child of God who knows that the Almighty is guiding every moment, shaping every outcome. There is an uncommon wisdom that comes only from God, a clarity that cannot be bought, argued for, or forced. It can only be received. And during these days, that wisdom will flow into your heart as rivers of light, cleansing every murky thought, cutting through confusion, and leaving you equipped to act with divine authority. You must understand, clarity from God also comes with responsibility. When He reveals the truth, He empowers you to act. And some of you will face decisions that challenge your comfort, that demand courage, that require you to step beyond the familiar. Do not shrink back. Do not delay. These days are a divine window. The steps you take in obedience to God's direction will determine the trajectory of your next season. Expect that some clarity will bring revelation about relationships, people you must release, people you must embrace, and even people whose role in your life is divinely temporary but necessary for your growth. God's clarity is surgical. It will cut away what hinders you and highlight what propels you toward your destiny. Now, let us speak about provision. Provision from God is never random. It is always a reflection of His will and timing. From the 18th to the 22nd, you will experience openings that are beyond human effort, beyond planning, and beyond expectation. God is going to bless the works of your hands, the seed of your faith, and the prayers you have carried silently for months, perhaps even years. You will see doors open in ways that cannot be explained by coincidence. Financial increase, career advancement, opportunities for personal growth, these are not mere blessings, they are divine signals that God is orchestrating your elevation. Some of you may witness sudden breakthroughs in business ventures, unexpected promotions, or opportunities that align perfectly with your skills, talents, and calling. Others will find that God restores what was lost, replenishes what was broken, and multiplies what was scarce. Listen carefully. God's provision is not just about survival. It is about abundance, influence, and readiness to fulfill the greater purpose He has designed for you. When you receive these blessings, do not forget the one who orchestrated them. Remember that provision comes with accountability. It is meant to be used for growth, for impact, and for alignment with God's plan. The enemy may try to stir fear, greed, or complacency, but from the 18th to the 22nd, your heart must remain aligned with gratitude, integrity, and faith. Expect the unexpected. Believe in the impossible. God's provision will arrive in forms that challenge human understanding but confirm divine sovereignty, reconciliation. This is where God demonstrates His power to restore the broken. Between these days, relationships that have been fractured will experience divine intervention. God will create moments where forgiveness flows, where misunderstandings are clarified, and where estrangement gives way to unity. Some of you will receive unexpected messages, phone calls, or encounters that carry the weight of heaven's plan. Others will experience the softening of hearts that were once resistant, the opening of minds that had been closed, and the restoration of peace that only God can provide. But understand this, reconciliation from God is purposeful. He does not restore indiscriminately. He restores what aligns with His plan for your life, what nurtures your destiny, and what strengthens your calling. The enemy will attempt to manipulate emotions, to incite pride, resentment, or stubbornness, but God's power will prevail. You must rise above human instincts that favor bitterness or control and embrace God's timing, His wisdom, and His discernment. In doing so, you will experience reconciliation that is not just emotional. It is divine. It liberates, it elevates, and it sets you free from past burdens that have hindered your progress. From the 18th to the 22nd, do not be surprised if relationships once thought lost are reintroduced with clarity, with purpose, and with God's unmistakable guidance. Protection is a topic too often underestimated, yet it is one of the most tangible ways God demonstrates His care. These days are not ordinary. They are charged with spiritual significance, and with significance comes opposition. The enemy will attempt to attack your mind, provoke fear, stir conflict, and bring discouragement. But God is erecting a divine shield over your life. From the 18th to the 22nd, you will sense His covering in ways that surpass human understanding. Your path will be guarded. Your home will be safeguarded. Your health will be preserved. And your destiny will remain untouchable. There is a supernatural dimension to this protection. Some of you will encounter circumstances that in the past would have been devastating, but now through God's shielding power, you will pass through unscathed. You will recognize that these are not coincidences, but divine interventions. And understand this, protection from God often manifests in subtle ways. A warning thought, a sudden change of plans, a fortuitous encounter. These are signals from God that your life is being strategically preserved. During these days, be alert, be prayerful, and be expectant, because God's protection is active, precise, and absolute. And now, destiny, our destiny. This is the culmination of God's work in your life. From the 18th to the 22nd, God is aligning every force, every opportunity, every connection to propel you toward the future He has ordained. Destiny is not accidental, it is deliberate, it is divinely timed, and it is unfolding according to God's infinite wisdom. You will witness events and encounters that are not random, but are orchestrated by God to accelerate your journey. Dreams that have been dormant will awaken. Talents that have been overlooked will gain recognition. Steps you have taken in faith will bear fruit that exceeds imagination. Understand this, destiny is not passive. It requires faith, it requires courage, it requires obedience. God is not just calling you to watch, He is calling you to act, to position yourself, to walk in alignment with His plan. Every prayer, every act of faith, every choice of integrity will be amplified during these days. And the results will be unmistakable, undeniable, and eternally significant. I say to you again, these 5 days are not ordinary. They are sacred. They are divinely appointed. They are a time in which heaven intersects with earth, where God moves in ways that defy human limitations. From clarity to provision, from reconciliation to protection, and culminating in destiny, every aspect of your life is set to experience divine acceleration. Your faith must rise to meet this season. Your expectation must align with God's power. Your obedience must match His wisdom. Do not wait. Do not hesitate. Do not allow fear or doubt to cloud this holy period. Speak with conviction. Walk in faith. Pray with authority. Align your heart fully with God's guidance and watch as He transforms these days into a testament of His power, His favor, and His sovereignty. Listen. I speak now to awaken a dormant fire in your spirit. God is about to move, not in whispers, not in subtle hints, but in undeniable earth-shaking ways. From the 18th to the 22nd of December, heaven itself will align, orchestrating events that cannot be explained by human reasoning, that cannot be predicted by human planning, but that only the omnipotent hand of God can produce. You must position yourself in expectancy, for these are not ordinary days. These are divine appointments, sacred windows in which your life, your destiny, and your future will experience acceleration. The enemy will try to sow fear, confusion, and doubt, but do not be deceived. God is sovereign, God is powerful, and God's plans cannot be thwarted by human limitation or spiritual opposition. Now, consider clarity. Clarity from God is a divine lens through which you will see truth with unwavering precision. It is not merely knowledge, it is illumination that cuts through the fog of doubt and confusion. From the 18th to the 22nd, God is releasing clarity that will expose hidden motives, reveal paths previously unseen, and give you confidence to act decisively. Some of you have wrestled with questions about your future, your purpose, your calling. Some of you have been paralyzed by uncertainty, waiting for signs that never seem to come. God is about to make those signs unmistakable. You will see with spiritual eyes what human eyes cannot perceive. The decisions that once seemed impossible will now be clear. The direction that once felt uncertain will now shine brightly before you. This is God's precision, His wisdom, and His divine guidance manifesting in your life. But clarity does more than reveal, it empowers. When you see God's path, hesitation loses its grip, fear dissipates. You will act boldly because you know that every step you take is under the supervision of the Almighty. Some of you will discover that clarity comes in the form of sudden insight, an idea, a revelation, a word that shifts your entire perspective. Others will experience clarity through circumstances that align in perfect timing, revealing God's hand in ways that demand recognition. Pay attention to these moments, for they are God speaking directly into your life, showing you that the season of confusion is ending and the season of divine strategy is beginning. Provision, God's provision is about to manifest in ways that transcend human expectation. Many of you have been waiting, praying, and hoping for relief, for opportunities, for resources that seem impossible to access. From the 18th to the 22nd, God is releasing a flood of favor that cannot be ignored. Opportunities will arise, finances will be replenished, doors will open where there were walls. But understand this, God's provision is precise. It will meet your needs, position you for your calling, and elevate your capacity to fulfill your purpose. Some will see breakthroughs in their careers, in business ventures, or in personal growth. Others will experience restoration. What was lost, what was stolen, what was delayed, will be returned in abundance, multiplied and amplified by God's supernatural hand. Provision is never accidental. It is a reflection of God's timing and His intimate knowledge of your journey. He knows exactly what you need, when you need it, and how it must arrive. Do not dismiss what seems small, for God often begins with small alignments that lead to monumental breakthroughs. And when provision comes, use it with gratitude, use it with integrity, and use it to align yourself even more closely with God's plan. God's blessings are never just for comfort. They are for preparation, for elevation, and for the expansion of your destiny. Now, reconciliation, this is God's power in the relational sphere. Any of you have carried wounds from betrayal, estrangement, and misunderstanding. God is about to intervene in ways that will restore balance and bring peace. From the 18th to the 22nd, hearts will soften, barriers will fall, and misunderstandings will be clarified. You will witness conversations, encounters, and reconnections that seem miraculous, but are in fact orchestrated by the sovereignty of God. However, understand that reconciliation comes only where it serves God's purpose. Toxicity will be removed, harmful patterns will be broken, but relationships aligned with your destiny, relationships that strengthen your purpose, will be restored and infused with God's wisdom. God's reconciliation is not merely emotional, it is strategic. It positions you for the future, clears obstacles from your path, and releases spiritual freedom. Do not resist it out of pride or fear. Receive it with discernment, receive it with humility, and recognize it as a divine gift. Some of you will see estranged family members come back, some will experience friendships rekindled, and some will witness resolutions to conflicts that seemed impossible. Reconciliation from God carries authority. It reshapes environments, restores hearts, and prepares you for the next level of your journey. Protection, listen carefully. From the 18th to the 22nd, God is raising a shield around your life that cannot be penetrated by human scheming, spiritual attack, or circumstantial pressure. This is not passive protection, it is active, dynamic, and powerful. You will feel a peace that surpasses understanding, a security that transcends fear, and a guidance that directs every move you make. The enemy will attempt to disrupt, to intimidate, to provoke, but God's protection is superior, omnipresent, and unstoppable. Some of you will experience divine warnings that prevent catastrophe. Others will witness situate ions resolve in your favor even before conflict arises. This is God moving to preserve your life, your purpose, and your destiny. During a time of unprecedented spiritual alignment, protection is not just for safety, it is for boldness. When you know that God is guarding your steps, you can act without hesitation. You can pursue your purpose without fear. You can engage in life with confidence because God is standing beside you, surrounding you, and intervening in ways invisible but undeniable. The hedge of protection that God places around you is your fortress, your refuge, and your advantage over every force that opposes your destiny and destiny. The culmination of all God's movement, from clarity to provision, from reconciliation to protection, Every divine action is orchestrating your destiny. These days are a convergence of heaven and earth, a sacred window in which God accelerates the fulfillment of your purpose. Opportunities, insights, and breakthroughs that once seemed distant will manifest. Talents, skills, and gifts that were overlooked will rise to prominence. Dreams that seemed dormant will awaken. Propelled by God's power, every step you have taken in faith, every act of obedience, every prayer lifted in earnest will converge to create momentum that cannot be stopped. Understand this, destiny is active. God will not fulfill it for you passively. You must align with His plan. You must move in faith, act with courage, and walk in integrity. Every choice you make, every declaration of faith, and every moment of obedience during this time will be amplified. God is not merely opening doors. He is aligning your steps, clearing paths, and placing people and opportunities in your life that will propel you into the next chapter of your calling. I tell you now, the enemy will attempt distraction. He will attempt deception. He will attempt to delay you. But from the 18th to the 22nd, his power is limited. God's authority is supreme. God's wisdom is unshakable. God's plans are perfect. You will witness circumstances shift, hearts change, and opportunities arise in ways that defy logic, defy explanation, but are unmistakably the work of God. You must not shrink from this divine moment. You must not underestimate the power of God moving in your life. This is your appointed time, your sacred window, your season of acceleration. Your faith must rise to meet the magnitude of what God is about to do. Pray with authority, expect with certainty, speak with conviction, act with obedience. Remove fear, remove hesitation, remove doubt. Position yourself fully in alignment with God's plan, and you will experience the fullness of His movement in your life. These days are sacred, powerful, and transformative, and they will mark a turning point in your life, a season of restoration, abundance, clarity, protection, and destiny. You must hear me clearly. God is not moving slowly. He is not merely adjusting circumstances. From the 18th to the 22nd, He is releasing a torrent of divine activity that will redefine your life. These are days where heaven itself touches earth. There are forces at work behind the scenes that you cannot yet see. But every moment, every detail, every interaction is being orchestrated with precision by the Almighty. Do not underestimate this divine alignment. The enemy will try to convince you that these days are ordinary, that nothing significant will happen, but God is about to prove otherwise. You will witness breakthroughs that defy human expectation, resolutions that surpass human reasoning, and blessings that overflow beyond measure. Let us speak more about clarity. For clarity is more than understanding. It is revelation that transforms decision-making, perception, and destiny. In these days, God will illuminate areas of your life that have been clouded in confusion. Some of you have struggled with choices, torn between fear and desire, unsure of the next step. God is about to reveal the pathway with undeniable certainty. You will suddenly understand where to walk, when to move, and who to trust. The wisdom that flows will not be ordinary. It will cut through distractions, false counsel, and indecision. It is divine insight that empowers you to act boldly, knowing that your steps are guided by God Himself. But clarity brings more than direction. It brings freedom. Freedom from doubt, from hesitation, from indecision. For years you may have carried questions in your heart that seemed impossible to answer. From the 18th to the 22nd, God will answer them, not with human reasoning, not with partial understanding, but with divine revelation. And with this revelation comes power. Power to act, power to decide, power to move in alignment with the destiny that only God can unfold. Do not resist it. Do not ignore it. This is your appointed time to see clearly, to rise confidently, and to step into what God has prepared for you. Provision, God's provision, in these days will not be incremental. It will be extraordinary. It is not the provision of human effort, of luck, or of chance. It is supernatural. Some of you have prayed for doors to open, for debts to be cleared, for opportunities to arrive, and God is about to answer. Expect increase in finances, in resources, in opportunities that you never imagined possible. God's hand will position you in environments where favor flows, where abundance is natural, and where every step aligns with divine blessing. This is not temporary or shallow. It is a preparation for the fulfillment of your calling, a setup for long-term impact, and a tangible demonstration of God's sovereign care. God's provision also teaches you faith. It reminds you that human effort is limited, but God's power is limitless. Some of you will see sudden opportunities at work or in business. Others will experience unexpected gifts, new connections, or alignment that accelerates your dreams. This is not coincidence. It is God's plan. Receive it with gratitude. Walk in integrity. Use it for the expansion of your purpose and the glorification of God's wisdom. Provision from God is never neutral. It carries purpose. Reconciliation, God's restoration in relationships, is a testimony of His power to heal, to realign, and to bring peace where there has been strife. From the 18th to the 22nd, relationships that were fractured, friendships that were broken, and family ties that were strained will encounter divine intervention. God will create moments where misunderstanding is cleared, where forgiveness flows, and where unity is restored. But this reconciliation is not indiscriminate. God restores what aligns with His plan for your life. Toxic patterns are removed. Harmful influences purged. Only relationships that contribute to your destiny, that enhance your spiritual growth, and that reflect God's wisdom will be fully restored. God's reconciliation is strategic. It positions you for greater alignment, clears obstacles from your journey, and releases you from the emotional weight that has hindered your progress. Some of you will see people return to your life unexpectedly, conversations resolve miraculously, and peace restore environments that once seemed chaotic. These are not human coincidences. They are divine orchestrations. Recognize them, embrace them, and allow God's wisdom to guide every interaction. Reconciliation is a key to unlocking the next level of blessing, provision, and destiny. Protection. This is God's divine safeguard over your life. The enemy may attempt to disrupt your peace, provoke fear, or challenge your steps, but God's protection is active, precise, and impenetrable. From the 18th to the 22nd, you will sense a supernatural covering around your mind, your body, your spirit, your home, and your future. Circumstances that would have overwhelmed you in the past will now be neutralized. Opportunities that could have been stolen by opposition will now arrive unhindered. This is not imagination. It is the hand of God defending what is divinely yours. Protection brings confidence, boldness, and freedom. When you are aware that God is guarding every step, you can move without fear, act without hesitation, and speak without doubt. Every decision becomes empowered by divine authority. Some of you will witness warnings that prevent disasters. Others will experience guidance that keeps you in alignment with destiny and away from harmful influences. God's protection is not passive. It is a strategic intervention that ensures your success, peace, and spiritual growth. Destiny. This is the culmination of God's movement. Every act of clarity, provision, reconciliation, and protection is designed to accelerate your purpose. From the 18th to the 22nd, you will encounter divine alignment that positions you for your future. Opportunities, insights, connections, and breakthroughs will converge, creating momentum that propels you forward in ways that surpass human understanding. Dreams long held in your heart will awaken. Skills and talents will gain recognition. Steps taken in faith will bear exponential fruit. Understand this: destiny requires action. God orchestrates, but you must move. You must act in faith, speak in alignment, and walk in obedience. Every decision, every prayer, every declaration during this period carries amplified significance. The enemy will attempt to distract you, to delay you, to discourage you, but from the 18th to the 22nd, his power is limited. God's authority is supreme, his timing flawless, his power unstoppable. You will witness circumstances change, hearts shift, and doors open that are unmistakably the work of the Almighty. These 5 days are sacred, holy, and charged with supernatural significance. You must rise above hesitation. You must prepare your spirit. You must align your actions with God's plan. Speak boldly, walk faithfully, pray earnestly, and expect fully. The movement of God is coming like a tidal wave, breaking barriers, overturning limitations, and launching you into the next chapter of your life, from clarity to provision, from reconciliation to protection, and culminating in destiny. God is orchestrating a transformation that cannot be delayed. You are standing on the threshold of a divine season. The days from the 18th to the 22nd are not ordinary. They are a divine appointment, a moment in which heaven touches earth, a time in which the faithful will witness the undeniable power of God moving on their behalf. You must hold fast to faith, because faith positions you to receive, positions you to act, and positions you to walk in alignment with God's will. Expect the miraculous, anticipate the extraordinary. Position your heart, your mind, and your spirit, and God will move in ways that will leave you in awe, in gratitude, and in full recognition of his sovereignty. Listen to me carefully, because what you are about to hear is not accidental, and it is not for everyone. If you have ever felt an unseen pressure against your life, if you have wondered why resistance rises the moment you step forward, if battles intensify when you choose obedience, then understand this truth: opposition does not appear without purpose. Resistance reveals value. Conflict exposes calling. Darkness never wastes energy on those who carry nothing. The reason the attack is persistent is because the assignment on your life is real. From the beginning of time, there has been a pattern, and that pattern has never changed. Forces that oppose God do not move randomly. They do not act emotionally. They are strategic, calculated, and deliberate. They study timing. They observe seasons. They wait for moments of vulnerability, and they focus their attention on those who are marked for purpose. The chosen ones are never attacked by coincidence. They are targeted because they carry something that threatens the order of darkness. You must understand this deeply. When God places his hand upon a person, the environment reacts. Circumstances shift, people change, pressure increases, not because something is wrong, but because something is right. When heaven endorses you, resistance emerges to test your endurance. When God elevates you internally, opposition arises externally. And if you do not understand this pattern, you will misinterpret the attack as failure instead of confirmation. Demonic forces always begin with distraction before destruction. They attempt to pull your focus away from God, not by obvious evil, but by subtle noise. They flood your mind with confusion. They create urgency without direction. They cause you to rush decisions instead of waiting in faith. Their first goal is never to destroy you immediately. It is to weaken your discernment. A distracted mind becomes a vulnerable mind. A divided heart becomes an open door. One of their most consistent patterns is isolation. Not physical isolation alone, but emotional separation. They work to make you feel misunderstood, unsupported, and unseen. They whisper lies that convince you that no one can relate to your journey. They try to convince you that your burden is too heavy to share, that your calling is too strange to be understood. And once isolation takes root, discouragement follows close behind. Another pattern is delay through discouragement. They cannot stop what God has decreed, so they attempt to exhaust your patience. They stretch the waiting season until hope feels thin. They amplify silence so it sounds like abandonment. They want you to believe that God has forgotten you, when in truth, He is preparing you. Delay is never denial, but discouragement will make it feel like it is. They also attack identity before they attack destiny. If they can confuse who you are, they can weaken what you are becoming. They bring thoughts of unworthiness. They remind you of past mistakes. They replay old failures in your mind as if they define your future. They want you to see yourself through the lens of weakness instead of through the promise of God. Because when identity is shaken, authority is compromised. Demonic forces are patient, but they are predictable. They intensify their activity right before elevation. The closer you get to alignment, the louder the resistance becomes. Sudden conflicts arise. Unexpected opposition appears. Relationships become strained without explanation. Your peace is challenged without warning. This is not coincidence. This is confirmation that movement is happening in the unseen realm. They also work through familiarity. They often use people closest to you, not because those people are evil, but because familiarity lowers your guard. Words spoken casually carry weight when they come from trusted voices. Doubt introduced gently feels reasonable. Criticism wrapped in concern feels justified. This is why discernment must be stronger than emotion. Not every voice around you understands the assignment within you. Another pattern is fatigue. They attempt to wear you down, not through one major blow, but through constant pressure. Small frustrations, repeated disappointments, lingering problems that seem unresolved. Their strategy is to make you tired enough to compromise, tired enough to settle, tired enough to stop believing. But hear this truth clearly: exhaustion does not mean defeat. It means you have been enduring something that matters. They also attempt to accelerate fear. Fear is their favorite currency. Fear of failure, fear of loss, fear of being exposed, fear of stepping out. They want fear to dictate your decisions instead of faith. Because faith aligns you with God's power, while fear disconnects you from it. Fear narrows vision, faith expands it. And they know that a person walking in faith becomes unstoppable. One of the most dangerous patterns is counterfeit peace. They offer comfort without obedience. They present options that feel easier, quieter, less demanding. They suggest paths that avoid conflict but also avoid growth. They make compromise look wise. They make retreat look like rest. But peace that does not come from God will always cost you something greater later. Demonic forces also exploit timing. They attack when you are transitioning, when you are between seasons, when the old no longer fits and the new has not fully arrived. Transition is holy ground, but it is also vulnerable ground. This is why confusion often appears during change. This is why temptation increases during growth. This is why doubt rises when movement begins. They try to redefine your pain as punishment instead of preparation. They want you to believe suffering means disfavor. But those chosen by God often endure deeper refining, not because they are rejected, but because they are trusted. Pressure shapes capacity. Fire purifies strength. Resistance reveals endurance. They also attack consistency. They do not need you to abandon faith entirely. They only need you to become inconsistent. Miss prayer occasionally, skip reflection, delay obedience, postpone discipline. Small compromises weaken spiritual structure over time. But understand this, consistency terrifies darkness. A person who shows up daily in faith becomes immovable. Another pattern is accusation. They accuse you internally and externally. Internally through guilt and shame. Externally through misunderstanding and judgment. They want you to defend yourself instead of standing firm. They want you to explain yourself instead of trusting God. But accusation loses power when identity is rooted in truth. They attempt to confuse spiritual sensitivity with emotional instability. When you feel deeply, perceive sharply, or sense things others cannot, they label it weakness. But what they call weakness is often discernment. What they call instability is often sensitivity to the unseen. Chosen ones are often misunderstood because they operate on a different frequency. They also magnify setbacks. They want one mistake to feel final, one delay to feel permanent, one rejection to feel defining. But setbacks are not conclusive ions. They are interruptions, not endings. God does not abandon His work halfway. What He begins, He completes. Demonic forces are threatened by your obedience more than your talent. Talent can be distracted. Skill can be misused. But obedience aligns you directly with God's authority. This is why resistance increases when you decide to live rightly, speak truthfully, and walk humbly. Obedience shifts power dynamics in the unseen realm. They also attempt to corrupt vision. They make the future look intimidating. They exaggerate the cost of obedience while minimizing the cost of disobedience. They want you to calculate risk instead of trusting provision. But God never calls without sustaining. He never leads without covering. He never appoints without equipping. They attack joy because joy is strength. When joy fades, strength weakens. This is why heaviness tries to settle without reason. This is why sadness appears even during progress. But joy rooted in God cannot be stolen, only surrender. And when joy returns, clarity follows. They use repetition to normalize struggle. They want you to believe that pain is permanent and resistance is your identity. But struggle is seasonal. Pressure is temporary. Growth is ongoing. What you are facing now is shaping what you will carry later. They fear your awakening. They fear the moment you realize that the attack is evidence of calling. They fear the day you stop asking, why me? And start declaring, I am chosen. Awareness dismantles their strategy. Understanding their patterns removes their advantage. You are not weak because you are attacked. You are strong because you are targeted. You are not abandoned because you struggle. You are prepared because you endure. God does not waste suffering. He transforms it. And as you continue forward, remember this. The same pattern that reveals demonic resistance also reveals divine protection. You are still standing, you are still breathing, you are still believing. That alone is proof that what opposes you has not prevailed. The battle is not to break you, but to build you. The pressure is not to crush you, but to clarify you. And the resistance is not to stop you, but to strengthen you. There is a reason the pressure does not break you, and it is because what God has planted within you is stronger than what stands against you. Darkness studies reactions, but God establishes purpose. When the opposition realizes It cannot intimidate you out of obedience. It changes tactics. It no longer tries to frighten you openly. Instead, it tries to normalize spiritual dullness. It encourages routine without reverence, movement without meaning, activity without alignment. It wants you busy enough to feel productive, yet distant enough to feel empty. But God never called you to function without fire. He called you to burn with conviction. Another pattern you must recognize is distortion of perspective. Demonic forces magnify the immediate moment and shrink the eternal vision. They make today's discomfort feel heavier than tomorrow's promise. They convince you that what you see now is all there is. But God always speaks beyond the visible. He works beyond the immediate. Faith is not denial of reality, it is alignment with a higher reality. And when you choose to believe God over what your eyes report, authority begins to rise within you. They also attempt to pollute memory. They bring up old pain, past betrayal, and unresolved wounds, not to heal them, but to reopen them. They want your history to speak louder than God's promise, but memory submitted to God becomes testimony, not torment. What once wounded you now qualifies you to stand with wisdom. What once broke you now strengthens your discernment. God never wastes experience, He redeems it. Another subtle pattern is impatience disguised as ambition. They rush you ahead of God's timing. They tell you that waiting is weakness and stillness is stagnation. But God builds depth before He allows display. He strengthens roots before He exposes branches. When you move before God releases you, you carry weight without support. But when you move with God, even slow steps carry power. They also try to corrupt prayer by making it transactional. They want you to pray only when desperate, seek only when pressured, and worship only when afraid. But prayer is not a reaction, it is a relationship. When prayer becomes constant, resistance loses leverage. When communion with God becomes daily, fear loses its voice. God responds to sincerity more than eloquence and to consistency more than intensity. Another pattern is exaggeration of flaws. They take a minor weakness and present it as a permanent identity. They want you to define yourself by what you struggle with instead of what God has spoken over you. But weakness acknowledged before God becomes a place of strength. God does not choose the flawless, He perfects the willing. What you surrender becomes what He empowers. They also attempt to manipulate emotions. Sudden waves of heaviness, unexplained sadness, or sharp irritation often arrive without cause. These are not always natural responses. Sometimes they're external pressures seeking internal agreement. Emotion is powerful, but it is not authoritative. Author. E.T. comes from truth. When truth governs emotion, stability returns. Another consistent pattern is resistance to rest. They either push you toward exhaustion or toward complacency. They want you either drained or disengaged. But God-designed rest is neither laziness nor escape. It is renewal. Rest realigns perspective. Rest restores clarity. When you rest in God, strength returns without striving. They try to weaponize comparison. They show you others progressing faster, receiving recognition sooner, or appearing more blessed. Comparison breeds resentment, and resentment dulls gratitude. But God never measures you against another life. He measures you against obedience. Your journey is custom designed. Your timing is intentional. What God builds in you cannot be rushed without consequence. Another angle of attack is the distortion of authority. They want you to fear authority excessively or reject it entirely. But God establishes order for protection, not oppression. When authority is honored rightly, covering increases. When authority is rejected blindly, exposure follows. Discernment is required, not rebellion or submission without wisdom. They also attempt to infiltrate language. Words shape reality. When you speak defeat, limitation, or hopelessness repeatedly, you reinforce what opposes you. Demonic forces listen for agreement, but when your speech aligns with God's promise, resistance weakens. Words spoken in faith activate unseen movement. Silence can be wise, but when you speak life. Another pattern is emotional bargaining. They suggest partial obedience. They convince you that doing most of what God asks is enough. But partial obedience delays full manifestation. God responds to surrender, not negotiation. When obedience becomes complete, clarity accelerates. They attack vision through familiarity. When you grow accustomed to God's goodness, gratitude can fade. What once amazed you becomes expected. But gratitude keeps spiritual awareness sharp. Gratitude reminds you who sustains you. When gratitude flows, humility increases, and humility attracts divine favor. They also target the inner voice. They want self-talk to become harsh, critical, and hopeless. They want you to speak to yourself in ways God never would. But when your inner dialogue aligns with truth, peace settles. Speak to yourself as one entrusted with purpose, not as one condemned by weakness. Another pattern is interruption of momentum. Just as consistency forms, disruption appears. Unexpected delays, distractions, or detours arise. But momentum anchored in God cannot be stolen, only tested. When interruption does not alter obedience, momentum returns stronger. They try to convince you that holiness is isolation from life instead of alignment with it. But holiness is not withdrawal, it is clarity. It sharpens perception, it strengthens boundaries. When you live aligned with God's ways, confusion diminishes and direction becomes clear. They also exploit unanswered questions. They want mystery to become doubt. They want silence to become suspicion. But God does not reveal everything at once because revelation requires capacity. What you do not understand now will make sense later. Trust is built in what is not yet explained. Another tactic is emotional numbness. When pain has been long, feeling can shut down, but numbness is not healing. God restores sensitivity without vulnerability to harm. He teaches you to feel deeply without being wounded deeply. Sensitivity guided by wisdom becomes discernment. They also attempt to provoke reaction. They want impulsive responses, emotional decisions, and rushed words. Reaction weakens authority. Response strengthens it. When you pause, listen, and align with God before acting, power shifts. They won. To believe that spiritual warfare means constant struggle. But true authority brings peace even in battle. Peace does not mean absence of opposition. It means confidence in outcome. God does not panic. And when you align with Him, neither should you. They feel your perseverance. Perseverance is faith with endurance. It is belief that refuses expiration. When you keep moving despite fatigue, when you keep trusting despite silence, when you keep obeying despite pressure, something shifts. The unseen resistance weakens when it realizes you will not retreat. They cannot stop what God has decided. They can only test whether you believe it. And every test you endure strengthens the foundation of your calling. You are not being punished. You are being prepared. God allows resistance not to expose your weakness, but to reveal His strength through you. What stands against you today will become part of the story that proves His faithfulness tomorrow. There comes a moment in the journey of every chosen one when the noise around them grows louder than the voice within them. This is intentional. Opposition seeks to drown discernment. It wants the external to overpower the internal. It wants circumstances to speak louder than conviction. But God does not shout over chaos. He anchors you above it. When you learn to listen from stillness rather than panic, clarity returns. Stillness is not passivity, it is alignment. And alignment restores authority. Another pattern emerges when progress threatens hidden strongholds. Resistance intensifies not because you are moving in the wrong direction, but because you are approaching something that must be dismantled. Darkness reacts when foundations shift. This is why turbulence often appears right before breakthrough. When systems are about to collapse, they shake violently. When lies are about to fall, they scream loudly. Do not retreat. When resistance peaks, stand firm, because you are closer than you realize. They also attempt to redefine strength. They glorify aggression, dominance, and control while portraying humility as weakness. But humility is not the absence of power, it is power under discipline. Humility keeps you teachable. It keeps your heart open and your spirit sharp. God resists arrogance not because it is loud, but because it is closed. A closed heart cannot receive direction. A humble heart becomes a channel for divine wisdom. Another tactic is the erosion of hope through familiarity with disappointment. When delays repeat, when prayers seem unanswered, when effort feels unseen, hope can quietly erode. They want disappointment to become your expectation. But hope anchored in God is not fragile optimism, it is resilient assurance. It does not deny delay, it transcends it. Hope remains even when evidence is absent because it is rooted in trust, not outcomes. They also work through overanalysis. They encourage you to think endlessly without acting obediently. They turn discernment into hesitation. They turn caution into paralysis. But God does not require perfect understanding before obedience. He requires trust. Understanding often follows obedience, not the other way around. Movement aligned with faith creates clarity that contemplation alone never will. Another angle of attack is the distortion of success. They tempt you to measure progress by applause, numbers, or recognition. But God measures success by faithfulness. What looks small may be foundational. What looks hidden may be essential. What feels unnoticed may be shaping capacity. When you stop chasing visibility and start honoring obedience, peace returns. They attempt to weaken resolve through subtle compromise. Not dramatic rebellion, but small concessions that seem harmless. A boundary softened here, a value added stayed there. But compromise never remains small. It grows quietly until alignment is lost. God does not demand perfection, but He does require integrity. Integrity keeps your inner world unified. A unified heart carries authority. They also exploit unanswered prayers to introduce resentment. They want gratitude to turn into entitlement. They want trust to turn into transaction. But God is not obligated by demand. He responds to surrender. When you release expectation and embrace trust, your heart remains free. Freedom keeps faith alive even in waiting. Another pattern is the misinterpretation of silence. Silence is not absence. Silence is often instruction in patience. God speaks in seasons, not impulses. What feels like delay is often development. What feels like quiet is often protection. If God answered every request immediately, growth would be shallow and dependence would replace devotion. They try to convince you that endurance means enduring alone. But endurance rooted in God is sustained by connection, not isolation. While the journey may feel solitary, you are never abandoned. Support may not look like you expect, but provision arrives when needed. God does not leave His chosen unguarded. They also attempt to corrupt discernment by emotional exhaustion. When you are tired, everything feels heavier. Decisions feel urgent. Clarity feels distant. This is why renewal is essential. Renewal is not escape, it is maintenance. God designed restoration because strength must be replenished. When you honor renewal, resistance loses its advantage. Another strategy is spiritual intimidation. They magnify the size of the obstacle to minimize your confidence. They make the challenge appear permanent. But obstacles are temporary, even when they feel entrenched. God specializes in dismantling what looks immovable. History proves that what appears powerful today can collapse tomorrow. They want you to believe that your sensitivity is liability. But sensitivity guided by wisdom becomes insight. Awareness becomes discernment. Depth becomes strength. God entrusts sensitivity to those He trusts with responsibility. You feel deeply because you are designed to perceive deeply. They also target resolve during transition from obedience to manifestation. The space between promise and fulfillment is often the most contested. This is where doubt tries to rewrite belief. This is where impatience tries to hijack faith. But hold firm that delay does not diminish the promise, it strengthens the vessel. They attempt to create false urgency. They push you to act quickly without prayer. They frame delay as loss. But God is never late. Timing is not pressure, it is precision. When you wait on God, you arrive prepared. They try to turn conviction into rigidity. Conviction anchored in God remains flexible in method while firm in principle. Rigidity resists growth. Conviction allows refinement. God refines those He trusts because refinement increases impact. They also attack through subtle pride disguised as self-protection. Pride isolates, it refuses help, it rejects correction. But wisdom welcomes refinement. Correction is not rejection, it is investment. God corrects because He sees potential worth developing. Another tactic is emotional memory loops. They replay moments of regret to keep you anchored in the past. But God operates forward. Repentance releases, not binds. What is forgiven is finished. Do not revisit what God has already resolved. They want you to underestimate consistency. Small, faithful actions, repeated daily shape destiny more than rare moments of intensity. Faithfulness builds structure. Structure supports expansion. When faith becomes habit, authority becomes natural. They fear your stability more than your passion. Passion can fluctuate. Stability endures. When your trust in God remains steady regardless of circumstance, resistance loses leverage. Stability confuses opposition because it cannot provoke reaction. They attempt to convince you that surrender equals loss, but surrender to God always results in gain. You lose what limits you and gain what sustains you. Control restricts vision. Trust expands it. They want you to focus on what you lack instead of what you carry. But God never calls without equipping. What you need will appear when obedience requires it. Provision follows alignment, not anxiety. They attack peace because peace reflects confidence. Peace is not ignorance of danger, it is awareness of protection. When peace remains under pressure, authority increases. God's presence stabilizes the inner world, even when the outer world shakes. They cannot comprehend obedience that persists without immediate reward. They do not understand loyalty that survives delay. This is why perseverance confounds resistance. Perseverance proves belief is genuine. And understand this deeply. The patterns of opposition reveal the depth of your calling. You are not encountering random resistance. You are encountering strategic opposition because your obedience disrupts unseen order. But what God has authorized cannot be overturned. Remain anchored, remain discerning, remain faithful. The same God who allowed the testing has already secured the outcome. And what rises against you now will eventually testify to the power that sustained you through it. There is a sacred tension that surrounds those who are chosen. A tension between promise and pressure, between calling and confrontation. This tension is not meant to crush you, it is meant to condition you. God allows resistance to refine perception. When everything is easy, discernment dulls. When pressure rises, awareness sharpens. And those who learn to discern in difficulty develop wisdom that comfort could never produce. Another pattern emerges in the realm of timing. Opposition intensifies when you begin to agree internally with what God has spoken externally. The moment belief settles deeply within you, resistance notices. Agreement activates authority. When your mind, heart, and obedience align with God's word, you become a moving force rather than a waiting one. That is when opposition attempts interruption. Because agreement with God releases momentum, they also attempt to distort obedience by attaching fear to it. They want obedience to feel dangerous, costly, or reckless. But obedience is never reckless when God leads it. It may be uncomfortable, but it is never careless. Fear exaggerates consequence, but faith clarifies outcome. When God instructs, He also sustains. When He directs, He also protects. Another tactic is emotional rehearsal of loss. They want you to imagine everything that could go wrong if you obey fully. They rehearse worst-case scenarios in your mind to weaken resolve. But faith rehearses promise, not catastrophe. What you meditate on becomes the direction of your courage. When you dwell on God's faithfulness, fear loses its narrative. They also seek to corrupt patience by redefining it as passivity. But patience is active trust. It is strength restrained, not ambition delayed. It is obedience maintained under pressure. God honors patience because patience demonstrates trust without control. Control resists God's process. Trust cooperates with it. Another angle of attack is the distortion of prayer into performance. They want prayer to become mechanical, rushed, or empty. But prayer is not about perfection of words. It is about posture of heart. When prayer becomes genuine, alignment deepens. God responds to sincerity more than structure. They attempt to fracture identity B by tying worth to productivity. When you are busy, you feel valuable. When you rest, you feel guilty. But worth is not earned through effort. It is established by God's choice. Rest does not diminish value, it preserves it. A rested spirit discerns clearly. An exhausted spirit reacts impulsively. They also target imagination. God-given imagination is meant to envision possibility, but opposition tries to turn it into anxiety. They turn creativity into worry and vision into fear. But imagination surrendered to God becomes prophecy, not panic. What you see internally shapes what you build externally. Another pattern is the misuse of truth. They twist partial truths to justify disobedience. They mix wisdom with fear, caution with doubt. But truth without context becomes deception. God's truth always leads toward trust, not retreat. If a conclusion produces fear, it is not aligned with divine wisdom. They want you to interpret resistance as rejection, but resistance is often recognition. What challenges you acknowledges your impact. Darkness does not confront what it does not fear. The fact that pressure meets you confirms that movement is occurring. They also exploit unresolved grief. Loss left unattended becomes vulnerability. But grief surrendered to God becomes depth. Depth allows compassion. Compassion sharpens leadership. God heals not to erase memory, but to redeem meaning. Another tactic is spiritual impatience with process. They want you to skip steps, bypass discipline, and avoid refinement. But God builds slowly to build securely. What develops over time endures pressure. What is rushed collapses easily. They attempt to distort vision by overemphasizing sacrifice. They want obedience to feel like loss rather than investment. But what you give to God is never lost, it is transformed. Surrender exchanges limitation for expansion. God never takes without mold, applying in purpose. They also use noise to disrupt clarity. Constant information, constant opinions, constant distraction. Noise fragments focus. Focus strengthens direction. God speaks most clearly where attention is undivided. Silence is not emptiness, it is space for revelation. They attempt to disrupt rhythm. God operates in rhythms of work and rest, sowing and waiting, speaking and listening. When rhythm is broken, imbalance follows. Protect rhythm. Rhythm sustains longevity. They fear your maturity. Immature faith reacts emotionally. Mature faith responds intentionally. Maturity stabilizes calling. God develops maturity before expansion because influence without wisdom causes damage. They want you to misinterpret testing as abandonment. But testing is evidence of preparation. God does not test what He plans to discard. He tests what He plans to trust. They also attempt to convince you that holiness restricts joy, but alignment with God produces freedom, not limitation. Boundaries protect joy. Discipline preserves peace. What God instructs always leads to life. They cannot endure sustained faith. They thrive on fluctuation. When belief wavers, they gain ground. When belief steadies, they retreat. Stability in God's truth dismantles their strategy. And hear this clearly, you are not fighting for victory, you are standing from it. God's authority precedes your obedience. Your role is not to overcome by force, but to remain aligned by faith. Remain steady when pressure rises. Remain obedient when answers delay. Remain humble when progress accelerates. What God has begun in you cannot be undone by opposition. The pattern of resistance is real, but it is temporary. The purpose of God is eternal. And those who remain faithful through pressure will discover that what once opposed them now stands powerless before the authority that was formed through endurance. Listen carefully. This is not a coincidence. This is not random, and this is not ordinary timing. If you are hearing these words right now, it is because God has been watching every tear you swallowed, every sacrifice you made in silence, every moment you stood when you could have quit. And God is about to pay you back with interest. Not just what you lost, not just what was taken, but multiplied, overflowing, pressed down, and running over in ways your mind could not calculate. This is not hype. This is a divine announcement. Something is shifting, something is being released, and heaven has not forgotten your name. There are seasons when it feels like life keeps withdrawing from you. You give your strength, your loyalty, your faith, your patience, and all you see is depletion. You pray and nothing moves. You sow and nothing grows. You obey and nothing changes. But hear this with your spirit awake. God is not unjust, and God does not lose accounts. Every act of obedience, every unseen battle, every time you chose faith over fear was recorded. You are not losing, you are depositing. And now the season of withdrawal is ending, and the season of divine repayment is beginning. God has a pattern, and that pattern is this: delay is not denial, and silence is not absence. While you were wondering if God had turned away, God was arranging things behind the veil you could not see. While you thought nothing was happening, God was aligning people, resources, timing, and favor. You are being prepared to carry what is coming, because if God paid you back too early, it would have crushed you. If the reward came before the refinement, it would have destroyed your humility, your focus, your faith. So God waited, not to punish you, but to protect you. Some of you endured losses that were not small. You lost time. You lost opportunities. You lost relationships you thought would last forever. You lost years you could never get back. And the enemy whispered that it was over, that you were behind, that others had passed you by. But God declares that nothing surrendered in faith is ever wasted. God does not pay back the way humans do. Humans return what they owe. God returns with increase. God returns with interest. God returns in a way that makes your past pain look small compared to your future reward. Interest means multiplication. Interest means acceleration. Interest means that what took years to lose can be restored in moments by the power of God. God is not bound by time, economy, human systems, or probability. When God decides to move, one day can redeem a decade. One encounter can rewrite a lifetime. One divine instruction can shift your entire trajectory. And this is why you had to survive what you went through, because the weight of what is coming requires depth, maturity, and trust. You must understand something profound. God does not reward noise. God rewards faithfulness. While others complained publicly, you endured privately. While others compromised to get ahead, you stayed aligned. While others gave up when it got uncomfortable, you stayed planted. And now God is saying that your consistency has come to maturity. What was planted in tears is about to be harvested in joy. What was sown in weakness is about to be reaped in strength. There were moments when you felt invisible. You did the right thing and nobody applauded. You kept your integrity and nobody noticed. You stayed honest when dishonesty would have benefited you. You remained kind when bitterness would have been justified. And it felt like life rewarded everyone else except you. But God saw it all. God does not miss details. God does not forget labor. God does not overlook loyalty. And when God decides to pay you back, the recognition will not come from people. It will come from God's own hand. This repayment will not look like revenge. It will look like restoration. God is not lifting you to shame others. God is lifting you to show what faith produces. God is not blessing you to create pride. God is blessing you to establish peace. God is not opening doors so you can boast. God is opening doors so you can breathe again. The reward is not just material. It is emotional healing, mental clarity, spiritual authority, and inner rest. God is paying you back in dimensions you didn't even know you were lacking. Some of you fought battles no one knows about. Battles in your mind when anxiety screamed louder than hope. Battles in your heart when disappointment threatened to harden you. Battles in your private life where you had to choose discipline over desire, restraint over impulse, obedience over ease. Those battles were not wasted. They trained you. They sharpened you. They strengthened your spiritual muscles. And now God is about to release a level of authority and confidence that only comes from surviving what should have destroyed you. When God pays you back with interest, it often arrives suddenly. One phone call, one opportunity, one connection, one idea, one shift in circumstances. And people will say you are lucky, but you will know it was preparation meeting promise. They will see the outcome, but they did not see the process. They will see the reward, but they did not endure the refining. Let them talk. Let them wonder. You do not owe anyone an explanation when God decides to elevate you. You must guard your heart in this season, because when favor increases, distractions increase. When doors open, opinions multiply. When God lifts you, people will suddenly remember you. Some will. want access, some will want control, some will want credit. Stay anchored, stay humble, stay aligned. Remember who carried you when no one else did. Remember who sustained you when resources were low and hope was thin. This blessing is not a finish line, it is a stewardship. God is not only restoring what you lost, God is correcting what was unfair. There were injustices you could not fight. There were lies you could not defend yourself against. There were situations where you were misunderstood, misjudged, and mishandled. You wanted to speak, but God told you to stay silent. You wanted to react, but God told you to trust. And now God is stepping in as your defender. When God vindicates, it is thorough. When God clears your name, it is undeniable. Interest also means overflow. God is not bringing you back to survival mode. God is not restoring you just enough to get by. God is shifting you from barely making it to abundantly supplied. Not so you can live recklessly, but so you can live freely. Not so you can depend on the blessing, but so you can deepen your dependence on God. Provision is coming that removes stress, lifts pressure, and allows you to serve, give, and live with peace. Some of you are standing at the edge of breakthrough, but your emotions are exhausted. You are tired of hoping, tired of believing, tired of waiting, and God understands that weariness. God is not offended by your fatigue. God is moved by your endurance. And God is saying, hold on a little longer. Do not let go now. Do not quit at the door. You are closer than you think. The last stretch is often the heaviest, but it is also the most rewarding. You did not go through what you went through to end up empty. You did not survive storms to drown on the shore. You did not endure pressure to live a small life. God allowed the shaking because God was building something unshakable inside you. What is coming requires courage, discernment, and faith. You are not late. You are not forgotten. You are not behind. You are aligned with divine timing. When God pays you back with interest, it also brings clarity. Confusion lifts. Decisions become easier. Direction becomes clearer. You stop second-guessing yourself because you recognize the voice of God more clearly than before. The season of uncertainty gives way to the season of confidence. Not arrogance, but assurance. You know who you are. You know whose you are. You know where you are going. The reason the opposition was intense is because the reward is significant. Resistance is often proof of relevance. Pressure is often a sign of promotion. If what you were carrying was small, the resistance would have been minimal. But because your future holds weight, the refining had to be thorough. God was not punishing you. God was preparing you to handle what is about to arrive without losing yourself. There are blessings that come and go, and there are blessings that establish. God is not giving you a temporary high. God is giving you a stable elevation. Something that lasts, something that grows, something that outlives the season. And this is why patience was required. Quick blessings can leave quickly. But what God is releasing now is rooted, grounded, and sustained by divine order. Your responsibility in this moment is not to strive harder, but to trust deeper. Anxiety will not speed this up. Fear will not protect it. Control will not preserve it. Faith is the currency of this season. Gratitude prepares the ground. Expectation opens the door. Stay sensitive. Stay prayerful. Stay obedient. Do not rush ahead of God and do not lag behind because of fear. God is about to surprise you with how personal this blessing feels. It will address wounds you never spoke out loud. It will answer prayers you stopped praying because you were tired of disappointment. It will touch areas you thought were permanently damaged. God specializes in restoring what seems irreversible. Nothing is too broken. Nothing is too delayed. Nothing is too far gone. You are entering a season where your story changes. The narrative shifts, the labels fall off, the past loses its grip, and the future begins to speak louder than your history. God is rewriting chapters that ended in pain. God is opening pages you thought were closed forever. And this time the ending will reflect the faith you held on to when it would have been easier to let go. Do not underestimate the power of what you have endured. Pain did not disqualify you, it qualified you. Tears did not weaken you, they watered the ground. Waiting did not delay you, it deepened you. And now the harvest is not theoretical, it is near, it is tangible. It is unfolding even now in ways you cannot fully see yet. There is a moment when faith stops being theoretical and starts becoming experiential, and you are approaching that moment now. God is not merely teaching you lessons anymore. God is transitioning you into manifestation. What you believed in prayer is about to appear in reality. What you declared in faith is about to take form. And when it happens, you will realize that God was never slow. God was exact. The timing will make sense only in hindsight, because divine timing always reveals its wisdom after obedience has been tested. God is about to restore your sense of dignity. For too long, circumstances tried to make you feel small, dependent, overlooked, or powerless. You had to ask when you wanted to give. You had to wait when you wanted to move. You had to accept help when you wanted to stand strong on your own. But God is reversing that dynamic. Strength is returning. Confidence is returning. Authority is returning. You are about to stand in a place where you no longer beg life for permission. You move with assurance because God has gone ahead of you. Understand this deeply. God's repayment is not random generosity, it is covenantal precision. God responds to alignment. When you aligned your heart, your actions, your patience, and your integrity with divine principles, you activated a spiritual law that cannot fail. Heaven responds when faith is consistent, not convenient. You did not just believe when things were easy, you believed when believing cost you comfort. And that kind of faith carries weight in the unseen realm. God is also healing your perception. You are about to see differently. What once looked like rejection will reveal itself as redirection. What once felt like delay will reveal itself as protection. What once seemed like loss will reveal itself as pruning. God was removing what could not go where you are being taken. Some doors closed not because you are unworthy, but because they were too small for your future. And now God is opening doors that match the scale of what you carry. There is a maturity being formed in you that money alone cannot buy. Even as provision increases, wisdom increases with it. Even as opportunities multiply, discernment multiplies too. God is not giving you blessing without boundaries or increase without insight. You are being entrusted, not just rewarded. That is why this season feels different from past breakthroughs. This one comes with peace, not anxiety, with clarity, not confusion, with stability, not chaos. You may notice that your desires are changing. What once excited you no longer satisfies you. What once distracted you no longer holds you. This is not loss, it is elevation. God is refining your appetite so you do not settle for less than what is aligned. When God pays you back with interest, God also upgrades your vision. You begin to think long term. You begin to value impact over impulse. You begin to understand that blessing is not just about possession, but about purpose. God is also restoring trust. Trust in yourself, trust in people again, trust in the future. Disappointment taught you to guard your heart, but God does not want you to live closed forever. God is teaching you how to be discerning without being distant, open without being naive, strong without being hardened. Healing is happening at a deep level, quietly reshaping how you love, lead, and live. Be prepared. When God elevates you, silence becomes strategy. You do not have to announce every move. You do not have to explain every blessing. You do not have to defend every decision. Let the fruit speak. Let consistency speak. Let peace speak. God will confirm what needs to be confirmed without you forcing validation. Some things are too sacred to be discussed prematurely. God is also correcting your internal narrative. For a long time, you may have seen yourself through the lens of what went wrong, what failed, what you lacked. But now God is shifting your identity from survivor to steward, from hopeful to confident, from waiting to walking. You are not trying to become, you are stepping into what has been prepared. And that shift will affect how you speak, how you decide, how you carry yourself. Do not be surprised if old doors try to reopen when new ones appear. Familiar cycles may attempt to pull you back into old patterns, old relationships, old fears, but you are not the same person who entered those seasons. What once drained you will now feel heavy. What once tempted you will now feel misaligned. Trust that discomfort, it is discernment at work. God is teaching you to honor the elevation by maintaining separation where necessary. God's repayment also includes generational impact. What God is releasing through you is not meant to stop with you. Your endurance is breaking patterns others could not break. Your faith is creating pathways others could not see. Your obedience is establishing a legacy that outlives the season. You may not see all of it immediately, but the ripple effect is real and it is intentional. There will be moments when gratitude overwhelms you, not because everything is perfect, but because you can finally see progress. You will look back and realize how far you have come, how much you survived, how deeply you were carried. And humility will rise naturally, because you know this is not self-made. This is grace meeting faith. This is promise meeting perseverance. Stay sensitive to God's voice in this season of increase. Increase can amplify distractions if discernment is ignored. But you have been trained through lack to listen closely. You have learned how to depend, how to wait, how to obey without applause. That discipline will protect you now. Do not abandon spiritual habits just because circumstances improve. Consistency is what sustains elevation. You are not entering a season without challenges, but you are entering a season where challenges no longer define you. They no longer intimidate you. They no longer derail you. You have seen too much, endured too much, grown too much. Confidence now comes from knowing that even if resistance appears, God has already proven faithful, and that assurance becomes your anchor. God is not only giving you more, God is giving you better. Better alignment, better connections, better opportunities, better peace, better understanding. You are no longer chasing everything. You are choosing wisely, and that wisdom is part of the interest God is paying back. As this unfolds, remember to stay teachable. Elevation does not eliminate learning, it refines it. Success does not end growth, it demands it. God will continue shaping you, guiding you, adjusting you, not because something is wrong, but because something greater is ahead. You are stepping into a season where your faith will no longer feel lonely, where obedience will feel lighter, where hope will feel justified, and where your life will begin to reflect the truth that God is faithful, God is precise, and God never forgets those who trust fully. And as this journey continues to unfold, layer by layer, moment by moment, you will find yourself standing in spaces you once only imagined, carrying a peace you once prayed for, operating with a clarity you once lacked, and witnessing firsthand that when God decides to restore, to repay, and to multiply, it is done with intention, with abundance, and with a depth that continues to reveal itself as you walk forward, anchored in faith, sustained by trust, trust, and established firmly in the understanding that this unfolding work is only beginning, moving steadily, powerfully, and purposefully in ways that keep expanding beyond what you once believed possible. There is also a divine recalibration happening within you, one that reorders your priorities and sharpens your inner compass. God is teaching you how to recognize what truly matters when abundance increases. In seasons of lack, survival dominates your thinking. In seasons of increase, stewardship becomes the test. God is not just asking whether you can endure hardship, but whether you can handle blessing without losing your center. This is why your heart has been trained before your hands were filled. God ensures the vessel is strong before the weight is added. You will notice that some things you once chased now begin to chase alignment with you instead. Opportunities that required exhausting effort before will now come with ease, not because you are entitled, but because you are positioned. Ease does not mean absence of responsibility. It means absence of resistance. When God is involved, progress flows. You will move with momentum instead of friction, clarity instead of confusion, confidence instead of hesitation. This is what happens when divine timing meets prepared faith. God is also restoring your voice. There were seasons when you felt unheard, dismissed, or minimized. You learned to be quiet not because you lacked wisdom, but because speaking felt pointless. But now God is reactivating your influence. When you speak, people listen. When you move, doors respond. This is not about control. It is about authority that comes from alignment. Authority that is not forced, but recognized. God establishes credibility over time. And now that credibility is beginning to bear fruit. You must also understand that God's interest includes emotional repayment. There were nights you went to bed heavy with disappointment and woke up still carrying unresolved grief. There were hopes you buried because you thought they were too painful to keep alive. But God does not forget emotional labor. God heals the inner world as thoroughly as the outer one. Peace will settle where anxiety once lived. Joy will rise where heaviness once ruled. Not superficial happiness, but a grounded assurance that steadies you regardless of circumstances. This season will teach you the difference between movement and momentum. Movement is effort without guarantee. Momentum is grace meeting obedience. You will find that when God breathes on your actions, results accelerate. What once took months now takes weeks. What once took weeks now takes days. And this acceleration is not chaos. It is order responding to divine alignment. God knows how to make time serve purpose. Guard your humility carefully, because humility is what keeps increase healthy. You have seen what pride does to people who rise too quickly. God allowed you to witness those lessons so you would not. Repeat them. Humility does not mean thinking less of yourself. It means thinking clearly about your source. When you remember who sustains you, gratitude stays active, and gratitude keeps doors open. God is also refining your discernment about people. Not everyone who celebrates you belongs with you. Not everyone who supports you understands you. And not everyone who wants access deserves proximity. This is not bitterness, it is wisdom. God is teaching you how to love without overextending, how to be generous without being drained, how to connect without compromising your peace. Relationships will become fewer but deeper, quieter but stronger. You may feel moments of awe when you realize how different your inner life feels compared to before. The constant urgency has faded. The pressure to prove has dissolved. You are no longer trying to outrun your past or convince others of your worth. You are simply walking in what has been entrusted to you. That calm confidence is not accidental. It is a sign that healing has taken root. God is also giving you a renewed capacity to dream, not impulsive dreams, but grounded visions. Ideas that align with purpose, plans that feel expansive but realistic. You will begin to see possibilities where you once only saw limitations. This is not imagination running wild. This is perspective being elevated. God expands vision when faith has proven steady. Be attentive in moments of stillness, because guidance often comes quietly in seasons of fulfillment. When life becomes louder with opportunity, the voice of God often becomes softer, inviting you to lean in rather than rush ahead. Stillness will protect your direction. Reflection will preserve your clarity. Do not confuse speed with success. Move when guided, pause when instructed, and trust that obedience remains the foundation even in abundance. There will be times when gratitude turns into tears, not tears of pain, but tears of release. You will realize how much you carried for so long. You will recognize how close you came to giving up. And in that realization, worship will become deeper, quieter, more personal, not because you need something, but because you remember what it took to get here. Memory, when guided by humility, becomes fuel for faith. God is also repositioning you in environments that reflect your growth. You will outgrow certain spaces naturally. Conversations will change. Interests will mature. This is not arrogance, it is evolution. God does not leave you where you started when obedience has carried you forward. Trust the discomfort of transition. It signals movement, not loss. As interest continues to unfold, you will find that generosity becomes easier. Not forced generosity, but joyful giving. When you remember scarcity, generosity feels risky. When you trust provision, generosity feels natural. God blesses through open hands, not clenched fists. What flows through you continues to flow toward you, not because of transaction, but because of trust. You are also learning how to rest without guilt. Rest once felt irresponsible because survival required constant effort. But now God is teaching you that rest is not weakness, it is alignment. Rest restores perspective. Rest preserves strength. Rest keeps your spirit receptive. In rest, you remember that you are sustained, not self-sustaining. This journey is reshaping how you define success. It is no longer measured solely by achievement, but by peace, consistency, and alignment. You no longer envy paths that required you to abandon your values. You no longer admire outcomes that cost integrity. You have learned that success without peace is too expensive, and God has spared you that burden. Remain patient with the unfolding. Some aspects of the repayment will arrive quickly. Others will reveal themselves gradually. God knows which blessings need time to mature. Do not rush what requires rooting. Trust the process even when progress feels subtle. Growth is still happening even when it is quiet. And as this season continues to open before you, you will keep discovering layers of restoration you did not anticipate, moments of clarity you did not expect, and confirmations that remind you again and again that nothing was lost, nothing was wasted, nothing was forgotten. As the unfolding work of God continues to move with precision, with depth, and with an ever-expanding reach that steadily reshapes your life from the inside out, strengthening your faith, refining your vision, and establishing you firmly in the flow of what is still being revealed, still being released, still unfolding beyond what you once thought possible, moment by moment, step by step, in a journey that continues forward without pause. There's a strengthening of spiritual sight happening now, a sharpening of awareness that allows you to perceive opportunity before it becomes obvious to others. God is teaching you how to recognize doors while they are still forming, how to sense alignment before it becomes visible. This is not intuition alone. It is discernment cultivated through years of waiting, listening, and obeying when answers were not immediate. You learn to trust guidance without needing full clarity, and that trust has refined your perception. God is also dissolving the residue of fear that once shaped your decisions. Fear once told you to settle, to accept less, to choose safety over calling. But that fear is losing its authority. Courage is rising, not loud courage, but steady courage, the kind that allows you to step forward without needing applause, to take responsibility without needing permission, to move with confidence even when outcomes are not fully guaranteed. This courage is not reckless, it is anchored. You are being taught the discipline of expectancy without anxiety. Expectancy says something good is coming. Anxiety says something bad might happen. God is replacing anxious anticipation with grounded expectation. You are learning how to wait with peace, to plan without pressure, to hope without desperation. This internal shift is critical because it protects your joy as much as your progress. God is also refining how you respond to pressure. Pressure once caused you to doubt yourself, to question your worth, to rush decisions. Now pressure is becoming a signal, not a threat. It alerts you to growth, to expansion, to responsibility. You no longer panic under weight, you adjust your posture. You no longer collapse under demand, you rise with wisdom. This is maturity unfolding quietly, powerfully. You may notice that problems no longer dominate your emotional space the way they once did. Challenges still exist, but they do not consume you. Your emotional center has stabilized. God has anchored you internally so external conditions no longer dictate your inner state. This stability is not indifference, it is trust. Trust that even if things shift, you are not abandoned. And even if plans change, purpose remains intact. God is also restoring your ability to celebrate without comparison. Comparison once drained your peace, making you feel behind or overlooked. That now you understand that timing is personal and paths are specific. You can rejoice for others without diminishing yourself. You can honor progress without questioning your own. This freedom is a sign of healing, and it allows gratitude to flourish without competition. There is also a recalibration of how you measure progress. You are no longer obsessed with speed. You value sustainability. You no longer chase everything. You choose what aligns. God is teaching you that long-term fruit requires patient cultivation. You are becoming comfortable with steady growth, knowing that what lasts is often built quietly. God is inviting you into deeper responsibility, not heavier burden, but greater trust. Responsibility expands influence, influence expands impact, and impact requires character. That is why God worked on your inner life first. Influence without character collapses. Blessing without discipline implodes. But what is coming to you is supported by depth, guarded by wisdom, and sustained by humility. There will be moments when you sense a holy confidence rising, an assurance that cannot be explained by circumstances alone. This confidence is not rooted in performance, it is rooted in relationship with God. It steadies you when outcomes are uncertain and strengthens you when choices are complex. It allows you to stand firm without becoming rigid, to lead without dominating, to succeed without losing compassion. God is also teaching you how to release outcomes without disengaging from effort. You work diligently, but you do not obsess. You prepare wisely, but you do not panic. You act responsibly, but you trust fully. This balance is powerful. It keeps you engaged without being consumed, committed without being controlled, you may find that gratitude now comes easily, even in small moments. Not forced gratitude, but genuine appreciation. You notice provision where you once noticed lack. You recognize progress where you once saw delay. This shift in awareness is not accidental. It is the fruit of a renewed mind. Gratitude sharpens vision, and vision sustains faith. God is also positioning you to become a quiet source of stability for others. Not through preaching, but through presence. Not through advice, but through example. Your calm will speak. Your consistency will teach. Your integrity will influence. You will not need to convince people of anything. They will observe the fruit and draw their own conclusions. As increase continues, you will become more intentional with your time. Time once felt scarce and rushed. Now it feels valuable and purposeful. You protect it. You invest it wisely. You no longer fill it with noise. God is teaching you that time is a form of stewardship, and how you use it determines what you grow. God is also renewing your sense of wonder. Hardship can dull wonder, turning life into survival mode. But as restoration unfolds, wonder returns. You find joy in simple things. You notice beauty again. You allow yourself to feel hopeful without guarding against disappointment. This is not naivety, it is healing. You are also learning how to sit with success without discomfort. Success once felt unfamiliar, even undeserved. But now you are learning to receive without guilt. You understand that receiving does not negate humility, it honors provision. You receive with gratitude, not entitlement, with awareness, not denial. God is continuing to align your inner convictions with your outward actions. There is less conflict between what you believe and how you live. Integrity is becoming natural, not forced. Decisions are becoming clearer because your values are settled. This alignment brings peace, and peace becomes your guide. There will be seasons when momentum slows slightly, not as a setback, but as a stabilizer. God knows when to accelerate and when to steady. Trust both. Acceleration builds capacity. Stabilization builds endurance. Both are necessary for longevity. And as this unfolding continues, you will keep discovering that the repayment God brings is layered, intentional, and deeply personal, touching areas of your life you once thought would remain untouched, restoring dimensions of your being you did not know were still waiting for healing, strengthening your trust, refining your purpose, and expanding your capacity to carry what is still unfolding, still advancing, still taking shape in ways that remain faithful to the promise, faithful to the process, and faithful to the unchanging truth that God's work in your life continues forward with precision, patience, and power, revealing itself steadily as you move ahead without retreat, without regret, and without fear.